So Adi, uh,
Yeah, bro.
okay, so Elon Musk is going crazy these days.
When has he not been going crazy?
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of things that he does. I mean there's obviously
Yeah.
there's Tesla, there's SpaceX, there's Neuralink,
Mm.
there's the Boring Company, which although sounds
Yeah,
boring is actually quite interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean he is what? Is he not the richest man on earth as well? That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean that is like for most people who don't understand how valuations work, that is one way to look at it, yeah.
Okay. So tell me what is the other way you can look at it?
I mean, this is all based on his, asset value of, what the market says and stuff like that. It's not like he actually has that much cash piled up in his bank or anything like that. So,
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean,
and
it's not
yeah,
like he has that much cash in
so
hand.
so, so so even to him, it'll be like a very irrelevant thing. Like he won't really care how much. He'll probably care about the assets he has, but he won't really care about how he's valued as the most richest person or anything.
But in my opinion, I mean, it should impact his decision making, right? So let's say you have, I mean, this is literally him. Let's say you have a space company that is sending rockets to Mars,
Mm,
or is like right now what? It's flying packages and astronauts to the International Space Station,
mm, mm.
right? It's doing this for NASA. It's not like doing it for itself. And at the same time, it's
Mm.
also like repeatedly testing and retesting and failing immensely on the Starship rocket. And there is
Yeah.
obviously a lot of liquidity associated with that. Like you
Mm,
obviously
mm,
have to
mm.
pump in cash to run a company like that.
Yeah.
So your valuation or the face that your company can put forth to others obviously does have an impact as well. And let's say, I mean, there are laws in place that I know which limits your ability to, let's say, funnel in money for a certain project. So let's say
Yeah.
he's funneling in money for Tesla as a company, right?
Mm.
I know that according to some American litigations, you can't really say you're making money in Tesla's name and then use it for SpaceX. That is not allowed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, unless you really have like a parent company with subsidiaries, then you can't do that.
Yes, yes.
Huh, huh.
So I'm guessing like these things do have an impact on everything that he does, like or how he's evaluated and things like that. I mean, yeah, sure. One way of looking at it is like if you have way too much money, you don't have to worry about what you're doing. You can just wake up and say, "Hey, here's like money for whatever you want to do." But the other way is obviously like controlling each individual asset and making sure like
Mm,
each one of them is profitable, or there is obviously some sort of bottom line that he's going to have. And
mm,
let's just
mm.
say having the richest man title there helps. I mean, today, if you and I want to build rockets and launch them to Mars, it's not possible because we don't have that much capital at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like even he had it. It's more like he's come up to that point. I mean, uh, I think what really made him quite famous to the world was the whole PayPal thing, where him and what's his name, Peter Thiel, basically, if I'm not wrong,
Yes.
came up with the idea of PayPal. I mean, even up till I think even up till PayPal, he wasn't that well known. I mean, because back then it was more of these techies who really knew him. The general public or the general population was not really that aware of who he is. But now when you look at it, it's like it would be kind of like a political sin to not really know who Elon Musk is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you would be living under some sort of a rock if you don't know who Elon Musk
Yeah,
is.
Musk is.
Um, but okay, there is like one interesting aspect of looking at it. Okay,
Mm,
by
mm,
looking at all of this, because in today's world, I see people like Sundar Pichai.
Ah.
I see people like Mark Zuckerberg.
Hmm.
I see people like Jeff Bezos.
Hmm.
I see people like Richard Branson,
Yeah.
who, because of their, let's just say, because of their ventures and like their capitalization, they have been
Hmm.
able to diversify and focus on a lot of different things. I mean, maybe not Mark Zuckerberg, but the others for sure. Um,
Hmm.
and at some point, there are obviously moral and ethical questions worth asking. I
Hmm.
am not going to get
Okay.
into like
Right.
the controversies
Okay.
that each one of them gets into or is sort of
Hmm.
tagged with. Um,
Hmm.
but it seems that with Elon Musk at least, um,
Hmm.
it seems that to me there is this sort of brighter picture that he's painting for everyone, saying like, "Hey, I'm saving the world. I'm helping you colonize Mars. I am easing
Hmm.
congestion. I'm trying to build towards a better world tomorrow." And there is
Hmm.
obviously
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
this sort of revolutionary in the right sense kind of a tag associated with him. Um, there is obviously this brings up the question like how much of this can I actually, let's say, put my faith into and trust. Like, sure, he's making some of the best electric cars out there. Sure, he's
Hmm.
making rockets that are reusable. Sure, he's trying to
Yeah.
tunnel through Los Angeles so that it eases like congestion and it eases traffic.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sure, he
Hmm.
like is using AI for things like Neuralink. Like, obviously, the both from a scientific and engineering perspective, there are fascinating things
Hmm.
for me to look at. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, at the same time, he's also like the richest man on earth who can do whatever he wants
Hmm.
to tomorrow. Uh,
Hmm.
and if history has anything to show us, it is that people in this position um, don't necessarily like to look at the broader picture anymore, and they start looking at the self-interest and what they can do with like the immense power that they have. And
Hmm.
I obviously want to ask you, like, because you're obviously more business oriented than me, uh,
Hmm.
to talk about whether there is or whether you see a risk of something like that happening.
I mean that kind of risk is always there. I mean, if in fact, like most of these amazing businesses uh turn start falling, or they start losing share in the market, or whatever it is that you want to call it, stop growing, simply because of that shift in focus. Because up to a certain point they focus so much on bringing value to, let's say, their customers, or they really try something very innovative and kind of try to disrupt the market or things like that, and suddenly the focus shifts to, how can I pump out the maximum cash I can from this venture, or how can I really maximize my earnings on this business, or things like that. So yeah, I mean that happens, and I think that's when companies also stop innovating. Like I think Kodak is a good example of that. Like uh, they did have a chance to move digital before anybody else, like with the digital camera and all that. But 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 then after that, I mean, they clearly didn't see a future in it. They clearly didn't see a future in it, and I don't know, for some reason they just never adopted it. They just, you know, kind of fell blank, and now nobody really knows about Kodak anymore.
I mean, there could be other reasons that influence like things like this. And a lot of people don't know this, but uh, let's just say in the tech world at least,
Hmm.
there could be game-changing technology that pops up. For example, uh,
Hmm.
most smartphones today they use a Samsung-based uh, display design,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Samsung gets huge royalty because of this, because they pioneered
Yeah.
this and they patented this. Um,
Yeah.
But there's nothing to say that Samsung will continue patent or like will continue profiting from this in the long run of things, because the smartphone as a device itself wasn't necessarily invented by
Hmm.
Samsung. It was invented by a lot of other people. In the same way, like
Yeah.
in the same analogy, like your Kodak camera, like sure, Kodak obviously put in their
Perfected it.
perfected it, but then
Yeah.
someone else could be taking off from it. Um,
Hmm.
uh, and that is one way of looking at it, like looking at Elon Musk and his ventures, like how what he is doing right now, or how he is conducting himself,
Hmm.
and how that might change in the future. But if general consensus is to be drawn,
Hmm.
let's just say he started off with SpaceX and Tesla,
Hmm.
and now he's expanded to redefine what Tesla actually is, or has
Okay.
expanded to look at things like Neuralink or Hyperloop, for example,
Hmm.
or the Boring
Yeah.
Company, or like the companies
Hmm.
itself are constantly rebranding themselves, and this sort of
Hmm.
good boy, like Tony Stark poster boy image is continued in some
Hmm.
ways. And
Hmm.
it's not
Hmm. Hmm.
like technology has not been disruptive along the way. I mean,
Hmm.
there have been definite game changers in like the companies that he's funding or the companies that he's
Yeah.
overlooking. Um,
Yeah.
so with this in mind, let me go back to that question again and ask you, like,
Hmm.
do you see this all going down, or like how much of a trust would you place on someone like Elon Musk?
So I think for me, I think the equation is pretty simple. Okay, it's like the minute the focus shifts, no, uh, like what you see becoming immediately apparent is how they stop investing in product development or R&D, because they feel, I've perfected this, I have this much of a market share. Okay, so let me just try to push out as many sales numbers as I can with this and try to maximize my sales. So when you start to see that happening, basically, like we were talking about the product life cycle, right? So it's not that you hit a peak. It's like you decide that, okay, now I've hit a peak and I need to extract from it. But good companies never hit that peak. They always keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing.
Hmm.
And so that's the thing. So R&D, I think how much they actually spend on developing a product, or how much they give that as an important weightage factor, and also how invested the owner or the CEO is in his own company. Like, has he put in a lot of money into his own company? That shows that he's willing to push the company to the next level. You know, yeah. If you see that slowly, these founders are removing their stake from the company, that's like an early sign that their intentions are kind of changing.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean that sort of does make sense. Uh, but at the same time, there are also companies that expand their umbrellas, like so things like Amazon or things like Facebook, that are
Hmm.
on the splurge of, let's say, acquiring smaller companies that help them diversify further. Uh,
Yeah.
is along the same path. Like it definitely is.
Hmm.
So Amazon is able to expand on the sort of web services, or is able to expand on the services that it offers online to its consumers,
Hmm.
is purely because Amazon is looking to redefine what Amazon is on a regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
But would you then say Amazon and Elon Musk and his ventures are similar in that regard? Like, because to me, Amazon looks like more of a monopoly that is looking that is heavily invested on profitizing, or like at least some key
uh
members are looking at profitizing from the ventures. But
yeah.
would you say that there could be similar parallels with Elon Musk and his ventures?
Okay, so for me it's like quite simple. Okay, I mean, you look at companies like Amazon and Google, right? uh, their products succeed because they have like humongous amounts of data about their customers. It's like they know that that product is going to succeed just because, I've collected this much. This is what people want. I come up with this and put it in the market. It is going to sell and fly. And Google does the exact same thing basically. Uh, Except Google, I think, pushes it a little bit further by saying, I'm going to try something new. At least they pretend, or at least they put in an effort to kind of be a little revolutionary. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think any company that kind of focuses on collecting user data than actually providing value, uh, you see that focus shift over there itself. Like with Elon Musk Ventures, it's not
Yeah, I mean,
exactly like that. Although with Neuralink, I think it might.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely there needn't be a one-to-one translation between companies like Amazon and companies that Elon Musk runs, because there are third parties that are heavily invested on things like user data, for example, to make analytics
Hmm.
easier and stuff like that. Which
Hmm.
brings in one aspect that I really like about Elon Musk's company. I mean, it is an important
Hmm.
aspect, of course, which
Hmm.
is the technological developments that is being brought about.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
people may think that these are, or these look to be over the top, uh,
Yeah.
but they are game changers. And I'll tell you why. Because
Hmm.
a few years back, when people spoke about electric cars,
Hmm.
they never envisioned sort of 600 to 700 kilometers of range. Or if you look
Yeah.
at the Tesla Roadster, which is what
Hmm.
Elon Musk and Tesla is coming out with, the new Tesla
Hmm.
Roadster, it is supposed to be able to uh, run at speeds of 400 kilometers per hour, and yet somehow magically has almost 1,000 kilometers of range.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'll not be surprised if this car weighs like 5,000 kilograms to help produce that much power required or something like that. But to think that a car could offer the same speeds as something
Hmm.
like a Bugatti Veyron, for example, an electric car, mind you, can
Hmm.
offer the
Hmm.
same speed as a Bugatti Veyron, yet not uh, be as costly, probably, hopefully not,
Yeah. Hmm.
and at the same time also run for a lot more kilometers than a Bugatti Veyron
Yeah. Yeah.
is revolutionary. Is
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
revolutionary because technologies don't just emerge like that. Like all of a sudden, they don't
Yeah.
just pop
Yeah.
up like that. Just because
Hmm.
someone thought about it or just because someone envisioned it. Like at least in the automotive world, from an engineering
Hmm.
perspective, what I can tell you is that for a long time, people had to struggle to even think of a car like a Bugatti Veyron that can
Yeah.
consistently run at speeds like that. And now that people
Hmm.
have done
Hmm.
it, they slowly started to realize the formula. But yeah, at the same time, like uh, having a rocket that is reusable is a huge advantage
Hmm.
because we never really did that. Like we never really reused rockets because we couldn't or we didn't have the technology in
Yeah.
place to do it. And now that we do, I mean, think about not just how much money it saves uh, launching the reusable rocket again, but also
Hmm.
how much of a lesser carbon footprint it has,
Hmm.
how it brings down costs associated with space travel, and
Yeah.
there, and I can keep going on and on like this. So
Hmm.
there are
Hmm.
definitely
Hmm.
like windows or like things or technological developments that are game changers or that are necessarily there. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, my question would then be like, when you account for the goodness. I'm okay.
Hmm.
Like, let me be clear here. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that Elon Musk is some sort of a supervillain that is going to destroy the world tomorrow, or is going to say, you know what, I don't give a damn about people anymore, and I just want to make money.
uh,
I'm not saying he'll necessarily do something like that, but at the same time, it's also concerning to think about whether we can completely put our faith in a man like this, especially when yeah, he's like the the richest guy in the world who can do whatever he wants to do.
But like, think about it. I mean, it's not so much about us being able to put our trust in him than him having had him having worked for years together to establish what he has done. I think it gives him that right to kind of run things the way he wants. Yeah, of course, it does impact a whole lot of people. I do agree with you there, but it's not. But I think, yeah, I mean, that's where I think government has to smartly step in and not kind of step on the progress that he's trying to make, but also keep those safety measures in place in case something like this does happen. Simply because it is going to affect a lot of people, like you said. So
Uh,
regulation, I think, is a big part of it.
yeah, I mean, and this is where it becomes a slightly more interesting conversation because governments themselves have agendas to keep
Hmm.
up. It's not like they don't.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when is the government going to necessarily do things that are beneficial to the masses rather than beneficial to themselves is questionable. Because, uh, okay, so a lot of people ask me, like, including you,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
ask me why can't engineers ever develop things that are just easy to use, like
Hmm.
and this is a perfect example why. So let's say the analogy you would like to make is it should be as simple as using an iPhone or using an Apple device because
Hmm.
of your association or your, let's say, your interest or your passion for the brand. So I mean, that is true because today when I buy a MacBook, I don't have to worry about uh, how it performs on the inside and only worry about how it appeals to me software
Yeah.
wise. And I can just continue using the software related aspects. But
Hmm.
there is obviously also equally a market that looks at developing a basis where customizability is an option. And as an engineer, I can tell you why this is important because today Elon Musk is doing all these ventures, right?
Hmm.
Let's say hypothetically tomorrow Elon Musk turns on us and there is a sort of need for
Hmm.
the society as a whole to come up with technologies. I'm not saying there's not already a need. There is a need.
Hmm.
Today we face issues like climate change. We face issues like expanding or terraforming or planetary exploration. Like everything that
Hmm. Hmm.
Elon Musk and his companies are doing, we
Yeah.
as a society or as human beings definitely would also like to look into it, and the scientific community at least is trying to expand or learn every day or is trying to grow as much as possible and work on these aspects. It's not like they're not,
Hmm.
but the reason why it becomes sort of more, let's say, why technologies could be more society oriented is because of this.
Hmm.
Because like you can't just make a singular product that solves the problems of a billion people. You need to make it a much
Hmm.
more uniform or stable platform where everyone can take it up and do whatever they want to with it, uh, and
Hmm.
and they can develop because it'll be very skewed if an engineer or if one single person says what I'm offering is the best of the best, uh,
Haha.
and then just give up on it afterwards. Did you just yawn?
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, okay, but I'm sorry if I'm boring, but yeah, what I'm trying to say is like there is definitely a need for a societal or a moral aspect of engineering or of
Hmm.
technological developments. And
Hmm.
I feel that although Elon Musk is doing a lot of these things, uh,
Hmm.
how much of that is going to translate to a societal impact is worth looking into. Like, sure, there are definite elements of it. Like today, NASA is using Elon Musk's rockets to go to different places and things like that. But
Mm,
beyond that,
mm,
like to the wider community, uh, I'd like to
mm,
I'd like to ask you. Like, I obviously see some elements of it from a tech perspective, but I'd like to ask you as a regular user where you see the
mm.
societal impacts of Elon Musk and his ventures.
I mean, if you are really someone who's planning to colonize Mars, I think that's something that immediately comes to mind. Like, if you're gonna have, let's say, even a minority of our population living on another planet, that in itself is going to give rise to so many opportunities at a scale not imagined before. Like, you're gonna have logistics, interplanetary logistics. Literally, that's going to be like a huge thing that's going to impact the way we look at how we kind of transport things around, or even the technologies that we currently use. Like, they will see a huge improvement in how we ship things around, just because there is an opportunity for something at a much bigger scale. So naturally, that's going to trickle down into even what we have in our existing systems as well over time. uh, so that's one way. And I think you look at the other venture. I mean, Neuralink is another huge one. uh, I mean, if we are really going to be able to kind of, uh, how do I put it, kind of get that analytical side of our brain to be almost perfect using AI, because that stage will come at some point, because AI is constantly learning. So there will be a point where we won't have to learn math at school just because we have the chip in our heads.
That
Or
oh, trust me, like engineers also don't like to learn math right now because there are like things that help them with the
yeah,
math. Yeah,
no, I mean, I see how that's an added benefit, because the complexity of problems that you'll be solving will be much bigger than, like, your ability to solve. You'll be able to solve much bigger problems than what we are able to imagine right now. And
yep,
we'll be able to focus on things that really, I think, matter a lot more. But again, like, it has both a dark side to it and a good side. I mean, if it can be used for good, it can be used for bad as well. So
yeah.
so that is something that definitely can impact the way we interact with each other. I mean, think about it. If we don't even have to open our mouths to talk anymore to each other, just using that chip in our head, and uh, a global interface that is spread all across the world, or all across wherever you find the infrastructure feasible. That's a
And
huge deal. I mean, it's definitely, yeah,
or having a high speed internet connection throughout the entire world. Yeah,
exactly. And access, and more than internet, it's like having the access to information like never before. I mean, you think about it and you will get information using Neuralink.
yeah,
It's not even like you have to search for something.
yeah. I mean that aspect is similar to the scientific world as well. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But me, I work with science day in and day out, and there are times
Hmm.
when I talk to you about something, and you tell me
Hmm.
to rephrase myself because it sounds very far fetched, right? Or
Hmm. Hmm.
I bring up something that is sort of may sound like a far fetched idea today, or sound very complicated, but is could be rebranded by someone like Elon Musk and is then suddenly up to the consensus of everyone, or everyone likes looking into it.
Hmm.
But even that being said, it's not like you are going to drive Teslas today unless you make a certain investment because they are still costly vehicles to buy. And in the same way, it's not like everyone gets to, uh, how shall we say, like everyone gets to realize the benefits of reusable rockets. So there is some for the general public in that sense, there is some level of far-fetchedness At least I think there is far-fetchedness. But what do you think? Do you think
Mhm.
Elon Musk and his companies offer far-fetched technologies to people?
No,
No,
no, no. I'll tell you how it works. Like usually when you look at innovation, uh, on a curve, right? It's not a linear process.
of course not.
Most definitely not. Yeah. So uh, it seems far-fetched because right now people are not able to envision those products being a part of their daily lives, and that's where that feeling of far-fetchedness comes from. It's like, oh, you know what, it costs 60 lakhs to buy a Tesla, and obviously that's not something I'm going to buy, so I might as well not care about it. But what people don't realize is, there's this group of people called the early adopters, and they are the guys who will actually go in and buy these cars. And once people start seeing, and once the number of early adopter increases, the curve kind of starts to shift. You're going to have a huge number of people suddenly buying a lot of Tesla cars, and when that happens, obviously economies of scale kicks in. They'll be able to produce cars at a much efficient cost, and because of that, the cost of acquiring one also comes down.
Yeah, I mean, there are other, I mean, apart from the early adopters phenomenon, or where you have like social media influencers influencing people to buy cars.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will ever happen, but if it does
Mm.
happen, let's see. But apart from that, like there is obviously the government aspect that you were talking about. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons, okay, so I live in the Netherlands right now, and
Mm.
one of the reasons why I am able to see a lot more Teslas in the Netherlands than probably a lot of other places in the world is simply because
Mm.
the infrastructure or the benefits of owning an electric car, like, or the far-fetchedness, people
Yeah.
are able to turn that into a reality in some aspect,
Mm.
and that's one of the reasons why it's there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but even if we remove this element, like even let's say we remove
Mm-hmm.
the far-fetchedness example, I want to ask you, like, do you really see a need for having an electric car that can probably do 2000 and sorry, not 2000, like 100 or 1,000 kilometers of range? Is that a necessity on an everyday basis,
I
or
I think
having
yeah. Sorry.
or looking at? So here's where I want to come in. Like, if Elon Musk, I
Mm.
mean, Elon Musk is trying to show what technology can be, like if we
Mm.
adopt this far-fetchedness. But
Mm.
is it something that you think you would necessarily need on a day-to-day basis? And I know this is sort of counterintuitive to what you were just saying 2 seconds ago about uh,
Yeah.
we may not need it right now, so we won't use it. But
Mm.
even then, not everyone needs a electric car that can do a 250 miles an hour or 400 kilometers an hour or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Or not everyone needs a reusable rocket immediately. Uh,
Yeah.
and if someone like Elon Musk actually did want to show to the broader
Mm.
consensus what technology or how much of a game changer technology can be, don't you think he could also have reduced that to suit a broader consensus of humans? Like, he could have built electric cars that are probably not as powerful or not as expensive, but just as reasonable to drive, or are much more convenient to own and drive around or use, for that matter of
Okay.
fact. Like,
Think about it this way. Think about it this way. Um, we didn't really need cameras on our phones.
yes.
We really didn't need them, right? Uh, but suddenly today it is the social norm. I mean, you buy any phone, like even I think the lowest phone, a camera is a mandatory feature. It's just considered normal, one of those things that's normal. And so I think it comes down to really about how you tap into that initial need that exists in people's minds that even they don't know about, and then kind of amplifying that. uh, and I think that's what he's done, Elon. I think he's trying to show people that, at least to a specific group at first, he's trying to show people that electric cars need not be slow, they need not be very functional. It's a sexy possession that you can have. It
Yeah,
doesn't
I
have
mean,
to be so.
he's removed the taboo associated with all these products. That's for sure.
Exactly, exactly. So now suddenly everybody wants an electric car.
Yep.
Suddenly everybody looks at Tesla and they say, "Oh my God, I need a Tesla."
The,
So I think, I don't know with what intention he's created that shift, whether he wanted people to kind of adopt electric cars into their lives. That we will never know. I mean, obviously not. Uh, but 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 definitely, what happens is that when you say, "Do we really need a car that goes 1,000, that has 1,000 mile range?" Initially, yes, because initially you don't have the infrastructure, and so you would want a car that maximizes the output, or maximizes the efficiency. But I think as more and more as the infrastructure develops, uh, electric cars will start innovating on aspects apart from the engineering stuff, like, uh, more to do with what else can I add on this car in terms of, uh, you know do I want some kind of a solar reflector on my roof, or uh, things like that, or more to do with consumerism. Right now it hasn't reached that stage yet. Right
yeah,
now it's still in that
yeah,
very.
yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why he has like a huge flat screen display in his Tesla Model S, for example. And I
Yeah.
mean that consumerism element is definitely slowly creeping in. I'm not saying no.
Hmm.
But what concerns me is at what point can he hold mass public opinion? Like this is where capitalism, or this is where exuberance becomes dangerous, right? So let's say when
Hmm.
someone is able to influence the opinion of millions and millions of people around the world, uh,
Yeah.
if there is a sort of fan base rather than a level-headed consumer base, uh,
Hmm.
there is scope for exploitation. Now, I'm not going to get into whether that is happening or not, because at least I don't see it happening right now. And I'm
Hmm.
not someone who's going to sit down and make crazy claims about Tesla and or like any of the Elon Musk
Yeah.
ventures.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that would be the point of concern. Like, when does uh, let's say consumerism occupy a capitalistic perspective rather than a socialistic perspective? And this is an important consideration to be made, because even in the case of something as game changing or as revolutionary as electric cars,
Hmm.
for example, I would say there are some immediate concerns, like uh, what kind of batteries is it going to have? Because lithium is not an abundant material
Hmm.
that we can just continue using. Or if you look
Yeah.
at today's world, when electronics or products that are electronic dependent, for
Hmm.
example, are having to face the crisis of silicon shortage around the world. Uh,
Hmm.
One of the reasons why I can't buy a PS5 today at a reasonable price, like how I could buy a PlayStation back in the day for a reasonable price, I'll get it early, is simply because
Yeah.
of the hype that is associated with consumerism today, or like those kinds of elements.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
that is definitely something worth looking out for. Or
Hmm.
I guess that's where um, having a level head pays, I would say.
Yeah. uh I mean, yeah, again, this comes down to, what kind of philosophy or ideology or organization follows. uh, because even in design, there's a lot of this minimalist and shaker philosophies that kind of try to emphasize, don't create something if it's not necessary, trying to like kind of promote, because I think that's where you start to lose sustainability as a factor. uh yeah, I mean, you have these needs and desires of the consumers, that you can kind of create something and fill that need or kind of satisfy that want or desire, uh, but which is the one that you're really going to work on? And are you going to make a conscious decision on why you're directing your resources to a certain uh, problem or a certain uh, you know uh, yeah, so like you said, like there has to be this sense of knowing what are the problems that you are going to employ your resources towards. Because once you're an established company, it's no longer about whether my product will work or not. I mean, yeah, sure, that's there, because even if they fail, they still have the resources to keep going. But it's more about what am I going to solve. It's more about where am I going to focus, where am I going to head this company, where am I going to direct my efforts, what's the culture I'm creating here. These are the kind of questions that kind of start popping into their heads. Initially, I mean, when you first start off, it's more like, oh my god, is this going to work? I have this crazy idea, I don't know, like
Yeah. I mean, that is the starting point of any engineering project, I feel.
yeah, yeah.
Because it
So
always starts there, like,
mm,
yeah, like whether a crazy idea works. But yeah, I guess what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me personally,
mm,
and that is something that I would definitely look out for. Uh,
yeah.
but as an engineer, okay,
Mm-hmm,
uh, if you were to ever believe my words as an engineer, I would only tell you this, especially in today's world, uh,
mm,
performance needs some sort of a moderation,
mm,
right?
mm,
Uh,
mm,
if you are presented with three options and someone asks you to
mm-hmm,
choose, I would ask you to pick the middle option because I know for a fact that that gives you the best performance to cost ratio.
mm, mm.
Uh,
But
uh,
yeah, yeah, sorry, finish.
yeah, so uh, that needn't necessarily translate to each and everything, or like cost is a very
Mm-hmm,
subjective thing for that matter of fact. Like, if you want to buy a rocket today, for example, I wouldn't say go
hmm.
for the middle rocket because that is probably has the best performance to cost ratio. But because yeah, I mean, paying for one rocket is like expensive enough. But
Hmm,
yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is moderation would be key in the adoption of technology or products or anything tech related for that matter in today's
hmm,
world, especially when resources are critical or we don't know what the hell we're doing or
hmm.
where things are going. Like these are big question marks that no one really wants to answer, anyways. But yeah, I guess moderation would help here.
But it's not actually that simple. I mean, in theory, that may sound nice, but uh, think about this, okay? Like, unless you really push hard on innovation in let's say an industry, in any industry that's pushing innovation hard, that always has an impact on you can how how you can actually make progress happen in other industries as well. Like uh, like as you see camera qualities, the quality of a camera increasing in smaller and smaller devices, and they're being able to put cameras into smaller devices. This could potentially have impact on the kind of innovative products you come up in biotech, where you're able to actually look into a person's body and kind of diagnose for certain diseases better when you couldn't do it before. Just thinking a bit broadly, but that so to say that moderation is the ideal solution may not always be the best case
Yeah,
to think about.
it definitely isn't. And
Hmm.
let me just put this out there, like as an engineer or as a scientist, when we do research or when we conduct research,
Hmm.
the scope of research is not limited by adoptability necessarily, or is not
Hmm.
limited by, let's say, the translation from a concept to reality.
Hmm.
There can be mean, it needn't necessarily be dangerous. Like, it
Hmm.
could be something like you were saying, like where I focus on developing better cameras today, but then the
Hmm.
impact could be elsewhere based on adoption. Um,
Yeah.
and from that ground, at least, yeah, I mean, definitely thinking of ideas or thinking of how far technologies can go uh,
Hmm.
definitely does help. And we have to strive to keep pushing. Uh, that
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
one area of science that I really like seeing how far you can take something as an idea rather than as a product or as a device or as a smartphone or a car that someone drives or a rocket that someone
Yeah.
flies off to or a chip in your brain that someone can use. Like even AI for
Hmm.
that matter, one of the reasons why people want to keep pushing AI is to see how far we can
Hmm.
go or how much we have to learn rather
Yeah.
than just what is possible. Like, sure,
Hmm.
that is definitely required. Like, there are like, let's say, constraints to the system, but these constraints shouldn't guide or shouldn't like divide or shouldn't sort of dwell in the basis of scientific research for that matter of fact.
Hmm.
But even me as a scientist, right, I'd be compelled to say that if you um close-mindedly, like especially in today's world, there is still room to adopt this sort of a principle where you think that I am pursuing things in the name of science because science is capable of restoring or is capable of expanding the umbrella in which we can do a lot of things, under which we can do a lot of things.
Hmm.
But even I would say that scientists or engineers, for that matter, they definitely like focusing on consumption of resources or usefulness of a certain data set that they can use or how to
Hmm.
tune the way they do things or carry out things because there could be real life impacts. Um,
Yeah.
for example, today when I work on rockets, I have to
Hmm.
prove that I don't necessarily have concerning military affiliations or affiliations that could
Hmm.
impact the broader perspective. But that being said, me working on rockets in general has an impact on society as a whole because someone else could be using the technologies that I developed today. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would definitely say that some level of moderation helps you. I'm not saying that you
Hmm.
necessarily have to adopt complete moderation, but then one thing maybe someone like Elon Musk could have done, like in the context of Tesla, for example,
Hmm.
he could have also developed cars that are much more affordable. Because in terms of a
Hmm.
game changer, you don't need to keep developing the same car again and again or the same performance again and again. He has expanded on usability, like even I guess even Ferrari and Lamborghini or Mercedes do this, where they take like a supercar engine and they dump it into an SUV and they call it suddenly like a family vehicle.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
mean your vehicle is actually a family vehicle. It just means that the performance is still there, but you're just expanding loosely on the umbrella term. But what I
Yeah.
would say is, like, if you actually do want to develop a family vehicle, for that matter of fact, you can reduce the power. You can focus more on the range of your batteries, and yeah, that moderation could step in, and you could make it much more of a broader perspective from that point of view, and that definitely helps.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at
And I guess
pushing
that
technologies.
that's where it'll be interesting to see, like how these individual pursuits of Elon Musk, how they develop
Hmm.
in that direction. Because to me, as a scientist or as an engineer, I would say like if you build a fast car, like even although even I have built fast cars, or although even I
Hmm.
have built on like racing cars and things like that, or
Hmm.
although I'm a motorsports fan, I would only tell you this: like if you are trying to develop the car of tomorrow, I would say
Hmm.
don't think about performance or like the number of seconds I could save on the road because no one is really going to use launch control to launch off like the signal lights tomorrow. Like no one's going to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I would say focus more on developing the broader perspective of products, or like the translation is
Hmm.
important, like seeing cutting edge translate to usable or wide
Hmm.
scope of things. That is where I'd be interested to see like what Elon Musk does from that regard, like how he pushes technologies more towards people rather than just ideas. I guess that's where
Yeah.
the difference would lie for me. I guess that's where like Elon Musk is either Tony Stark or is probably someone like Lex Luthor or whatever comparison you
Hmm.
want to make.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think uh, I mean, when you push to see just how far some piece of technology can be taken, uh, it's really like you're creating something in a vacuum with no real specific use case, like you said, you know. But the minute you start really looking at people and start looking at creating products for them, uh, that's a whole different thing altogether. Then, uh, yeah, then it feels a bit more organic because then you're going by what people want and what they need, and not just necessarily saying that I have the best piece of technology, so you should buy this.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, you can probably pitch in over here and talk about like uh, what you feel like. This is where I want to bring you in and ask you questions like when you talk about hey, like I like using a smartphone that is just easy to use, or I like using because you work with UI and UX on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. You obviously are looking at optimizing the user experience or the interface or how people consume products or how people consume information through the
Yeah.
design perspective. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be design, it could just be a product that is developed and how
Mm-hmm.
people start using it much better. And yeah, I guess uh, making it more user centric in
Yeah.
a way where even scientists don't have to ask too many questions, or like let's say
Yeah.
anyone for that matter doesn't have to ask too many questions. uh,
Mm-hmm.
don't you think that would be important, like as a
uh
yeah, I mean, go on, let me not interrupt you.
no, I mean, more than asking questions, it comes down to, like, at least in design, when you look at these approaches to innovation, like design thinking or human centered design, uh, a lot of the initial phase, a lot of the so there are basically three stages where you have inspiration, ideation, and implementation. So inspiration and implementation take up the most time, simply because inspiration is all about knowing what problem you're going to solve, or choosing the right problem to solve. So, and implementation is about how that problem is actually being solved, and yeah. So I think that by itself tells you a lot about how important it is to really focus on coming up with the right problem statement. Problems are easy to find, but what are the ones you're going to be working on? I think that's what people need to focus on. uh, every problem that you have can be a potential to be something big, or you tap into a need and you can exploit it and you can make a ton of money from it. But how is that really impacting people or impacting society as a whole? Is it something that's l- genuinely helpful or necessary or improving people's lives, or is it just something that's fancy and we're wasting resources towards that particular problem?
Okay, so this gives me a crazy idea.
Mm-hmm.
uh so yeah, I guess we have been talking for a while now, and this obviously needs a certain direction. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so now that you brought that up, that is a very interesting point that you brought up as well, which is like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make the process more organic, or how do you give like a use case to a development of a product? Uh,
Hmm.
we can probably like in the next episode, we can probably think of some aspect or some technology or some
Hmm.
product that we think could could come up in the few next few years, or does have
Mm-hmm.
a significant necessity, and how you
Mm-hmm.
would then sort of sort of focus on it both from a design perspective and as well as like a technical perspective, and then club it
Mm-hmm.
together and then focus on the ethics or the morality involved with that product development. What do you think? Does that sound like a
Yeah.
good idea to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a nice way to take it forward for the next one.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess then that about wraps it up for this episode or this segment or whatever you want to call it. Uh, Hopefully, people's dark alleys have been okay. I'm not going to phrase it that way. That sounds very wrong. But yeah,
No, but like yeah,
hopefully people's understanding has expanded slightly from what we were talking about,
hmm,
and that there can be some level of involvement with what we were saying.
yeah,
And I guess
yeah.
we gave them relevant pointers along the way where they could associate both with your perspective and my perspective as well. And I guess, like, yeah,
Hmm,
we can use that to develop further.
yeah, yeah.
All right, then. Uh, should we ask people to like, share, and subscribe to this?
No, no, they'll do it if they want to.
All right, let's wrap this up then.
Yeah.
Peace.